The Danganronpa series has seen a number of class trials. I mean, how could it not? Each class trial in the series serves as a major plot point in the story of each respective game. Danganronpa's class trials are easily the best and most exciting part of each game. What is a class trial, you ask? If you deadass ask yourself that question, I don't think you should be watching this video. Oh, okay, we should all at least know the concept of what Danganronpa is. 16 talented high schoolers are trapped in or on some kind of facility and are forced to kill each other. Once a murder actually happens, the students will inevitably be thrown into a class trial, where they pull together evidence of the case and try to figure out who the killer is. If you guess the killer right, only they will die. If you guess the killer wrong, everyone else besides the killer will die. Pretty much every class trial follows this formula with the exception of some cases, but it's easy to come to the conclusion that some trials are better than others. Now we're gonna address the elephant in the room. Which one of these trials is absolute booty cheese? Obviously, there are gonna be at least like 1 or 2 trials that people just flat out don't like. In this video, I'm going to be going over the class trial that I personally think is the worst in the entire series. Danganronpa 2 Trial 3. This is without a doubt one of the most hated trials in the entire series. Before even making this video, I wanted to get all your opinions on what you thought the worst trial was, so I low-key just asked on the Plushroom Discord to see which trial everyone hated, and was euphoric to see that almost everyone had agreed that Trial 3 of Danganronpa 2 was the worst one. I just want to clarify, I'm not making this video because they said that. We just all happen to collectively agree. So what is it that makes this trial, and honestly the whole chapter itself, so bad and disliked amongst the fandom? Well, I'm gonna explain my thoughts in this very video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, hype the video if you want to support the channel, and please, genuinely please do not take this video too seriously. It's all fun, games, and entertainment. So what's the first thing we should address with this? Yeah, I'm gonna keep it a buck, the motive's not a great start. As we know from the start of every Danganronpa chapter, Monokuma usually presents some kind of motive to the students in order to encourage them to keep killing each other. In Danganronpa 2, Chapter 3's motive is the despair disease, a highly contagious disease that when caught gives people all kinds of despairing symptoms. When I was first playing through the game, this just caught me so off guard, bro. Like, the despair disease. Up to this point, this felt like one of the most random, unrealistic motives of all time. And yeah, given the fact that Jabberwock Island is a simulation, it makes sense for everything to not really be that realistic. But up to this point in the game, the last thing I was expecting was a fucking pandemic. In my opinion, the motive of this chapter kind of just ends up making everything feel a little forced. Yes, that's the purpose of the motive, and the despair disease had a lot of potential to actually be something more interesting to the story, especially with how it ties into the memories of the students. But aside from the culprit, everyone who's infected with the despair disease in this chapter doesn't do anything interesting. I can at least admit that the despair disease is fine in concept. Just the way it played out was so stupidly underwhelming, dog. I will say it made way more sense than the weird Necronomicon shit from V3. Before we take a look at the trial, let's take a look at the victims who ended up being murdered. Ibuki Miyota and Hiyoko Saionji end up being the victims of this case. I gotta give credit where credit is due. Danganronpa deaths are usually great at making people feel something. And while I was really surprised to see these chain of events play out in the chapter, Ibuki's death honestly feels like one of the least impactful in the entire series. Obviously, I'm a dumbass, alright? At first, I low-key didn't get the memo that the hanging body belonged to Ibuki. I didn't really get a glance of the victim's hair, so I was kind of just like, oh, alright. And when I found out that the victim was actually Ibuki, I was like, oh, alright. Ibuki was honestly just a character I ended up forgetting about over time. Now that doesn't mean I don't think her death was sad. Obviously, I think her death was sad. And it really sucks to lose one of the most charming comic relief characters in the cast. She's far from a bad character, but also never one that really stood out to me. It just felt like Ibuki never got enough screen time or purpose in the story, and her character felt a little cut short. The same could be said for Hiyoko, who also dies in this chapter. What the f? Okay, Ibuki dying is one thing. I can kind of understand that. But Hiyoko? Y'all were just in the middle of giving my girl character development. What happened? I could at least forgive them for axing Hiyoko if there was some kind of deeper meaning or story to her death. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. I understand that originally Fuyuhiko was supposed to take Hiyoko's place, but like, is that any better? Why not kill off Sonya or Kazuichi? Why do you want to kill the characters that are actually getting development? A lot of the things that happen in this chapter feel really random and don't really have that much of a great impact on the story. This could honestly be said for every chapter 3 in the series, but 2-3 make some pretty questionable decisions on victims. I'm not saying killing Hiyoko and Ibuki doesn't work, but the way it's done here makes their deaths feel kind of meaningless. Now, how about the main point of this video, the actual trial itself? How's that?
There's nothing.
It's punishment time!
I guess, bro. Trial 3 of Danganronpa 2 has one of the most disappointing outcomes in the entire series. I would like to get some positives out of the way, however. I've been pretty negative this whole video. The killer obviously ends up being Mikan Sumiki, the ultimate nurse. And I kind of like how the students usually rely on her autopsy, and in this case, she ends up lying about it. Honestly, pretty clever, and I love that Mikan played that role in the first place. Mikan's crash out was also pretty interesting to see. It gets worse, but we'll talk about that later. And Nagito screwing around with everyone in the trial was also pretty funny and entertaining. Alright, back to negative closure. As a lot of us already know, this case is literally impossible. Mikan does not have the time, skills, or equipment to pull any of this off. It doesn't help that by the end of the trial, there's so many unanswered questions. How did Mikan put up the wallpaper on this extremely high pillar? What and where the hell is Hyoko's murder weapon? Why wasn't Mikan weakened by the despair disease? How the hell did she achieve super speed? And that's another pretty common complaint about this trial, bruh. Mikan's doing all this? From what I remember, at no point is it specified that the despair disease alters the way you move. And Mikan is the clumsiest, slowest, most fragile character in the whole mother freaking series. And it's not like Mikan's been putting on an act the entire time. Only when she catches the despair disease does she have the intent to kill. It feels so lame. Bringing back Mikan's memories is an interesting idea, but when it's actually implemented here, it leaves you to feel more confused than anything. More on that later. But even when you do consider that Mikan didn't have the appropriate amount of time to plan her plan, she's still the most obvious killer. Up until she's suspected, she isn't really saying or helping much. It's just... Even before the event of the murders, Mikan was playing a huge role in this chapter. She was taking care of everyone who had the despair disease, but obviously me as a player is going to suspect that she's going to catch it at some point. Unlike some of the other chapters, Mikan is playing a huge leadership role. Yet when she actually kills people in the trial, she isn't really doing much to steer anyone in the wrong direction. They try to put suspicions on other characters with the imitation of the movie, but that's arguably the most forgettable component of the entire chapter. I completely forgot about that movie as a whole, and it played such a small role of discussion in the trial. At the end of the day, it just felt so unrelated and insignificant. It just feels like a weaker version of the motive from the previous chapter. Anyway, back to the culprit. Mikan is pretty silent until she's finally accused, and this is where things admittedly get pretty interesting. Turns out the killer might have been the one taking care of everyone with the despair disease. Who could have seen that coming? The characters start to doubt Hajime, and understandably so. Mikan was incredibly selfless and helpful during the course of events. Doesn't matter, she killed both of them. Why? The despair disease. Oh, brother, this guy stinks! Mikan was affected by the disease the whole time. Say it with me, who could have seen this coming? Yeah, unfortunately, this is a pretty lame ending to Mikan's character. The same could be said for the victims of this case too, but I'd like to argue that Mikan goes out the saddest, and not in a good way. From the disease, Mikan manages to regain all her memories. Alright, that actually sounds pretty interesting. I wonder what they'll do with that. It's kind of just an excuse for Mikan to go out on a killing spree. That's the way I see it, at least. It would feel so much more powerful if Mikan had a reason for killing Hyoko other than her being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hyoko was literally the one always dogging on her. You're telling me you're not going to take advantage of that character dynamic when Mikan finally decides to snap at Hyoko? By the end of the trial, I low-key just have a sour taste in my mouth. 3 characters done so dirty by the plot, the second dumbest motive in the entire franchise, and deaths that honestly don't contribute much to the rest of the story. And we haven't even talked about the execution yet. This is where I get mad. When playing Danganronpa, the executions are usually something to look forward to at the end of the trial. It's the absolute climax of whatever character is guilty of murder. With that being said, I can say with absolute confidence that this is genuinely the worst execution of all time. Bye-bye, ouchies. Fucking blows. It is so bad. It's so bad. In Mikan's execution, she is just sexualized and given the most anticlimactic ending any character has ever seen in the franchise. All this while the most random bullshit is being cobbled together in the background. After seeing this cutscene, what am I genuinely supposed to make of this entire trial? Mikan's character is treated like a joke. No one cares about the victims who died. And the climax of the entire trial sucks! Playing through this trilogy, I've never felt so underwhelmed finishing a chapter. All chapter 3s seem to have this problem with a lot of people, even Ultra Despair Girls, which is easily the worst of the bunch if you want to count it. But something about 2-3's trial leaves a really crappy taste in your mouth. The third case in Danganronpa V3 is admittedly pretty bad too, and I don't blame anyone who hates that one more than this one, but at least Korekiyo had a decent execution. What genuinely happened here, bro? I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like Danganronpa 2 is a bad game. This game has so many good plot points, characters, and forms of foreshadowing, and I will say Chapter 3's build-up to events was pretty decent and exciting, but that build-up doesn't feel as special when everything collapses in an awkward way during the trial. How am I supposed to care about Mikon being the killer when she's transformed into a completely unrecognizable version of herself? It's understood that she gained back her memories and started to experience some old trauma, but none of it feels explored. It feels like this only happens for the sake of another double murder, and a crime scene that's way more complicated than it needs to be. But hey, bruh, there's always hope for Danganronpa 2x2. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments on what you think the worst Danganronpa trial is. Remember, this video is just my opinion, and it's not meant to be taken seriously at all. And if any of you want to insult me over an opinion, then go do that shit on Reddit or something, bro. Like, it's just never that serious. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out my Danganronpa plush series if you haven't already. And I'll see you around the Plushroom Kingdom. Peace.